All right. We're back. Aren't you sick and tired of treason, America? Aren't you fed up with liars and cutthroats, carpetbaggers and scumbags? The nation's loaded with them. All the lawmakers, and isn't that interesting how they refer to themselves as lawmakers? Nancy Pelosi comes out yesterday about Benghazi and says, it's a diversion. It's just a diversion. Hey, Nancy, I got a question for you. It's a diversion from what? The criminal enterprise that the entire federal government has become? You mean the thugocracy of the United States of America? You mean the fact that our state and our nation has become basically a police force for corporate America and the desires of a small oligarchy of power players up in Washington, D.C.? That you guys bend over every time the lobbyists say so, as long as they throw their money at you? You're whores, every last one of you. You're political whores. You mean that diversion? You mean the gangland might makes right mentality that is operating and running the BLM, the IRS, the FCC, the FAA, the ATF? You mean that gangland thugocracy mentality? Is that what we're talking about the diversion from? The oligarchs like you in all these positions of authority who dictate to the peasantry what we can and cannot do? Exactly what is it that it's diverting attention from, Nancy? Jay Carney, he comes out and the guy is a paid liar. I mean, he's worse than a weatherman. He's the only guy that not in the weather business that can lie for a living and get away with it. And he let the cat out of the bag the other day, inadvertently, of course. He acknowledged that the president's unilateral intervention in the 2011 Libyan civil war hasn't led to a stable government in either Libya or in any of the tribal country around it. He said there's a difficult dynamic in place there, which is the result, the positive result, in the sense that Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi is gone. But, you know, you have a situation in these countries where a dictator held together a nation through intimidation and force. Isn't that the same argument that we heard from George Bush when he went into and took Saddam Hussein out and turned Iraq into a bloodbath? Isn't it? Isn't that the same excuse that every liberal puke in the nation screamed bloody murder over? Isn't it? It is exactly the same. Not a difference, not an ounce worth of difference. This is the same thing that the liberals and the progressives screamed bloody murder about when Bush did it in Iraq and removed Saddam Hussein by force. We took that, which was a nation that, yes, was ruled by intimidation and force, but at least there weren't hundreds of thousands dying in the streets every year. There may have been thousands because the guy was a monster and he'd pick people up off the street and murder them. But now you've got a civil war where the deaths are 20 times what they were under Saddam Hussein. 50, 100. Millions are dead from our war in Iraq. Millions. Civilians. I'm not counting the fighters. You can leave them out of the mix. Millions of civilians are dead, ladies and gentlemen. And not just there. Millions of civilians are dying right now. All over the world. Because we intervene, and this is the same guy who, on one hand, claims that Bush is this tyrant, and you know, Obama we're talking about, right? He's claiming Bush is starting these, wars of imperialism, blah, blah, and then he gets in and he does the same exact thing. And guess what? All of the Bush critics are now silent as crickets. Nobody's complaining. The same people who railed against Bush, who I admit openly was a traitor and a liar, and should have been imprisoned for crimes against humanity, crimes against his own nation, and treason. I'll admit it. Nobody else will. Nobody else will use those words. You won't hear any other talk radio host talking about that. You won't hear Rush Limbaugh say George Bush was guilty of treason. You won't hear Glenn Beck say President Barack Obama is guilty of treason. I will. I get it. That's why I'm not on 50 or 100 or 500 stations like Rush Limbaugh. I know it. Because they're never going to let me say these things to the broad consensus. Ever. They'll never allow it to happen. They'll kill me first. I'll die of a heart attack, or I'll die being mugged in the middle of the woods. All right? I'll get mugged or something. Or I'll get run over by a cement truck as I'm getting out of my car. Or I'll die of a heart attack. I'm telling you, they'll never allow this show to hit the levels that you see for any of those people. You know why? Because I'll say what they won't say. Because I don't have to worry about whether or not somebody's going to pull my sponsors. I've got a few. This guy the other day who said to me something about ratings in my an evil email he sent me on a Facebook page because he didn't like what I had to say about Cliven, who's now become Al Bundy, out there shooting off his mouth when he has no idea what he's talking about. And he doesn't know the pitfalls that these scumbags in the mainstream ministry of propaganda will set for him. And he's setting our entire movement back a decade. Shut up, Cliven Bundy. Don't talk. Because every time you open your mouth, they're sitting there rubbing their hands with glee because they can turn it into something else. They'll pull it out of context. They did. I don't know what more proof you want. But you should not be giving daily press conferences because you don't have the skill set to do it. I love you, Cliven, but be quiet. See, the truth of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, everything in this country is wrong. Everything is wrong. There's nothing right about what's going on. Benghazi is an act of treason. The president, the Secretary of State, and the Pentagon were involved in a gun-running operation that was feeding arms to al-Qaeda to help overthrow Gaddafi. They knew it, they cared, and they wanted to make sure that they loaded up those weapons, which they could not get done in any other place by any other method. Congress would never approve it because if the American people found out that we're the number one gun-running company in the world, they'd have a kitten. So they do it secretly. And don't tell me it wasn't done before by past presidents. It was done during Iran-Contra with Reagan. It was the same crap, ladies and gentlemen. Every president does it. Clinton did it, Bush Sr., Bush Jr., this one, the last one, every one of them. We are not this wonderful, beneficent uncle that you think we are. We are a terrorist organization. It's just what terrorists we're supporting at the moment. Don't you get it? The imperialism in the United States is the dogs of war. These people don't care about life and liberty and sanctity and sovereignty of nations. They don't care about borders. You want proof? On Business Insider, there's an email from this jackass who went on to Fox News. Former White House National Security Council spokesman Tommy Vietor, I don't know how you say his last name. He went on Fox News yesterday, and he was talking with host Brett Baer. Now, Brett, by the way, I got to tell you, out of all of the news programs out there, his is about one of the best ones there, and not because he's on Fox, just because Brett really does news. Okay, it's not opinion; it's a news program, and it's around 3 o'clock in the afternoon our time. And he grilled this guy over the talking points that they used on this Benghazi attack. And finally the guy says, dude, he says, right? Dude, this was like 3 years ago. Excuse me. Let me just stop you right there. Dude, like 4 of our people came home in body bags, man. Like, dude, how flippant can you be, dude? I mean, dude, were you smoking a blunt on your way to the studio, dude? The hell kind of an answer is that? Are you insane? He kept answering, I don't remember. I believe so. I don't remember. I don't really recall. I believe so. That's the interview you do? That's supposed to inform the nation. That's supposed to educate and make the citizenry aware of what's going on in our country. Is that real? Is that right? I mean, that's the kind of guy that we bring on? We have lost all hope of any level of saving grace from these people. There is no way they're going to voluntarily back off. There is no way that these people are voluntarily ever going to stop being what they are. How do I know that? Because one, there's too many of them, and two, they're too deeply embedded. Cheryl Atkinson on CherylAtkinson.com. Atkinson, excuse me. It's Atkinson, Attkisson. Sharyl, Sharyl, Atkinson. And I apologize. I always pronounce it Atkinson, but there's no N. She has a newly released government email that indicates that within hours of the attack, the State Department, run by whom? Hillary Clinton, already had concluded with certainty that the Islamic militia terrorist group Ansar al-Sharia was in charge and was to blame. Now, this was an internal private communication that directly contradicts the message that not only Barack Obama, but also Hillary Clinton herself, not to mention Susan Rice and Jay Carney and every other sycophantic nonsense liar two-bit mouthpiece came out there and spoke about. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, that 2 weeks after all of this transpired, the president went before the United Nations and blamed the video. He had empirical, documentary evidence from every aspect and every vestige of the nation. He had it from the State Department. He had proof from the CIA itself. He had proof from all of the intelligence organizations. He had proof from the veterans that were there. He had proof from his own people. And he went out there and lied to the world on a national stage in the UN. What are we to make of that? The man is a pathological liar. We know that. And we know that now with empirical proof because he did the same thing to us about Fast and Furious. He's done the same thing to us about the IRS. He's done the same thing to us about Obamacare. He's done the same thing to us about every aspect that he touches. Anything and everything that this man touches turns to crap. And on purpose. He doesn't care about his legacy, and I'm going to tell you why. By the time the history books are written, these scumbags are guaranteeing that they will be the ones to write it because they will be the phoenix of tyranny that arises from the ashes of liberty, freedom, and a republican form of government. They are guaranteeing it. And this buffoon, he's so sure of it, he doesn't even care. He's already convinced that it doesn't matter what my legacy is. I don't care what the people think of me right now. I will be remembered in the history books 20, 40, 80, 100 years from now the way in which I want to be remembered. And it doesn't matter what the actual reality was on the ground back then, because the United States of America will be a totalitarian dictatorship, and they will rewrite the history books to make me glorious. The email was a private communication, and it was entitled Libya Update from Beth Jones. Now, she is, Jones was at that time the Assistant Secretary of State to Hillary Clinton. So she answered directly to Hillary. Directly. There was no intermediary between her and Hillary. And based on this email, she had spoken to the Libyan ambassador at 9:45 p.m. on the day after the attacks. Now, 9:45 a.m., the following morning. In other words, the attacks occurred that night at dark, and by dawn, she was on the phone with the Libyan ambassador. And here's what she had to say. Quote, when the Libyan ambassador said his government suspected that former Gaddafi regime elements carried out the attack, I told him the group that conducted the attacks, Ansar al-Sharia, is affiliated with Islamic extremists. That's what she said in her email. the article goes on to say there is no uncertainty assigned to the assessment. It does not mention any video, and it does not mention any kind of a protest. The State Department provided the email to Congress in August of 2013 under special condition that it not be publicly released. What does that tell you? It tells you it should bring to mind the word collusion, whitewash, cover-up, corruption. It was given to Congress on August of 2013 under special condition that it not be publicly released at that time. Representative Jason Chaffetz sought and received permission to release it on Thursday. Why must Congress seek, and who, permission from who? Jason Chaffetz doesn't work for the damn federal government. He works for us. Let me show you who she copied this email to, because it tells you everything that you know about the level of treason that is going on in our nation on a day in and day out basis. Deputy Secretary William Burns. Undersecretary for Political Affairs Wendy Sherman. Jake Sullivan, who was then the Deputy Chief of Staff. Now he's been promoted to the National Security Advisor to Vice President Joe Biden. The Undersecretary of State, Patrick Kennedy, was also copied, as was Cheryl Mills, then Secretary Clinton's Chief of Staff. Now, this isn't a person who answers to her. This is a person who works directly for her. This is the person who wipes her butt. This is the person that holds the tissue while she blows her nose. This is the person that rubs her neck while she's drinking her water. Okay? The Secretary of State, and in any position like that, whether it's President, Secretary of State, the Chief of Staff is the person that you interact with. That is your man Friday, your guy or gal Friday, your right-hand man. That is the hand of the king. You can't tell me that person doesn't have interaction with Hillary and say, hey, Hill, we just got this email. Check this out. Cheryl Mills, who was the chief of staff at the time, now she sits on the board of directors of the global investment firm BlackRock. How convenient. And Victoria Nuland, then the State Department spokesperson. Now she's an assistant secretary of state. So she went from spokesperson to assistant secretary of state. You know, when I used to work for a large corporation, it never ceased to amaze me, and I wasn't alone in this observation, that many of the people who worked at the corporation were inept and or incompetent in some degree. And when they made a massive mistake, instead of them being removed, they were churned back in to the company and either moved to a position where they became somebody else's problem, or and almost invariably it engendered a promotion for them to move across, because nobody wants a lateral move. They all want an upward move. And so what ended up happening is these people would be promoted but moved away. It wasn't really because the person who was getting rid of them was concerned about the benefit or the welfare of the company as a whole. They just wanted to get their problem gone. And the only way to get rid of that problem, because nobody was going to willingly accept a lateral move, was to give them a promotional move. So they gave them a promotional move. They went and lobbied somebody else and said, hey, this is the person for you, for the new director or the new, whatever. And we used to have a saying that went like this: screw up one more time and you'll be vice president of the company. And the reason is because every person who did a major faux pas for whatever it was would invariably get promoted and moved. I mean, it was stunning to us. We looked at it and we're like, You kidding me? That person just got this new title and job? Holy smoke, how did that happen? Secretary of State Newland used to be the spokesman, but she did her job. She lied to the American people. She lied to the government. She lied to us. And she screwed up one more time and got moved up. Screw up, move up. Screw up, move up. Any of you who have ever worked for a large corporation, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Here's the problem, folks. We've reached the point of no return. We've reached the point of no return. This idiot, Viter, who was interviewed on Bret Baier's show, Baer kept saying to him, you don't remember? I mean, how can you not remember, in other words? You know, you were there, right? And Viter turns around and he says, dude, this was like 2 years ago. We're still talking about the most mundane process. We're talking about the process of editing talking points. That's what bureaucrats do all day long. He just indicted himself and all of his co-conspirators. The truth is, there ain't a single one among them that isn't guilty of treason. And I got to tell you, it's time for America to say enough's enough. We're done with it. We've had enough. We're filled up to the limits, and we're done. There is nothing worse than people that will injure their own nation for their own personal benefit. Nothing. And you can't accept or expect that we can allow that to continue and that there's ever going to be any kind of a semblance of legitimacy to our nation with these people involved. Not in charge, just involved. They all have to go. Every one of them labeled dishonorably discharged and permanently barred from ever playing another role with any level of authority related to government. And I'm not talking about you can leave the federal government and become a state official. I mean barred permanently from politics. Like that idiot, what's his name, Sterling, is going to be barred from basketball. For life. Banned for life. Dishonorably discharged. Anything less than that, and we've left the cancer in the body. All right. You're listening to America's Voice. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Teresa Douglas. She is an advocate and a fighter against Agenda 21. She's up in the St. Louis area, and she's going to expose for us this unconscionable new law that they're trying to pass in St. Louis. Ladies and gentlemen, this thing is so outside the scope of what anyone could perceive to be reality. This is the unreality almost of Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. Really. Wait until you hear this. You're going to have to get a permit to cohabitate with someone who's not a family member and become a landlord licensee. Wait until the LGBT gay community finds out about this, because they cohabitate all the time and they can't legally get married. Oh my goodness. Wait until the young people who say, "Hey, I'm a guy in college and I want to rent. I want to get a roommate in here. I'm a girl and I want to share my home with my boyfriend." What constitutes cohabitation? Is it 1 night, 6 nights, 24 nights? Who knows? It's not, you see, there's no rules to it. It's all left up to the subjectiveness of whatever little micro tyrant, whatever little short mustache Hitlerian is running around with the notepad. This is insane. And by the way, the penalties? $1,000 a day and up to a year in prison. It's a police state, folks. If you don't get it, I don't know what else to say. But the proof is everywhere. My job is to just give you the proof. Your job is to then take it and do something about it. We'll be back in just a minute. You're listening to America's Voice Now. You can communicate with me directly via email. You can send me email to mike@americasvoicenow.org. That's mike@americasvoicenow.org. Make sure that you visit our friends over at Patriot FB, patriotfb.com, and also constitutionclub.ning.com, constitutionclub.ning.com. We'll be back in just a moment.